I don't know who needs to hear this, but you shouldn't be creating your signature warm edits with the white balance slider. Now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely fine to give your images a warm summer feeling. I do that with my images, and my style is definitely a lot on the warmer side. But I don't do it with the white balance sliders. Why shouldn't you just use the white balance slider? I think that's a great question. You should always ask why when some random on the internet tells you to do something a certain way. We should get used to asking why, because if you don't know why you should do something, you don't know what to do if it goes wrong. So the real reason that you shouldn't be color grading or adding your signature style with the white balance slider is really because it only goes from blue to yellow. It's just a very limited adjustment. Sure, it's great for correcting the color of light on a cloudy day, or if you're inside taking photos under halogen lights, it's really good, but it's got no range. If I turn my white balance all the way up, my image starts to look really yellow, and if I turn it all the way down, it starts to look really blue. I personally think that creating your signature style using the white balance slider is like a chef just adding chili into every single meal and calling it consistency. Sure, it's easy, it's fast, and they'll all taste spicy, but it's not the right way to add your signature style to your work, and it removes all the nuance you're trying to create. Let me just cut to the chase here. The secret sauce that I want to share in this video is the color grading tab. Who would have known that the right way to color grade your images is using the color grading sliders? Like, have a look at these wheels. I can spin them all the way around, and I've got a full range of colors I can choose from. I can literally add any color that I like, and I can do that in the shadows, in the midtones, and the highlights all independently. I personally didn't know this a few years ago, and now that I do, it's taken my work to a whole new level. But trust me, I still get pushback from people in my photo editing course saying things like, my images are fine the way they are, or color grading is just destroying my work. And I understand how you can feel like that. I used to be the exact same way, and I was too scared to jump into color grading. But in this video, I want to show you that there actually is a better way. I'm going to run through 2 photo edits in this video and show you the way that you should be color grading your images in order to create your signature style. And it's not by using the white balance slider. First things first, what is white balance actually for? Now, here's an image that hasn't been color corrected in any certain way. I've turned off all my color grading, and just ignore the fact that I've done all the tone adjustments. I'm not going to talk about that in this video. That's a completely different video that we could be talking about. But here I just want to focus on white balance and actually color grading. So what should we be using the white balance for? Well, the white balance is to correct the white balance in the room, right? To correct the skin tones. Everything inside the basic panel here in Lightroom or any editing software is to bring your edits back to a good starting point, right? Is to adjust them back to a good, like, neutral starting point. And there's a lot that's involved in that within the tone and making sure the exposure is equal, actually flattening out the image with your sliders here. But most importantly, the white balance is to bring it back to the correct white balance that was ambient in the room. Now, straight out of the camera, this is probably slightly too warm. And you can see if I keep going warmer on this, it quickly becomes very yellow. And I don't want that. I don't want the skin tones to be wrong to start with, because then I've just got a real uphill battle to try to bring them back to something that is correct. So I want to just bring this to make it actually perfect, make it equal to what it was in the room. Now, always go too far and come back. So with this, I'm going to go too blue and come back. Starting to get too blue, starting to get too cool. I'll come back up a touch there. And we're probably looking around there, probably 5500. Inside, that's pretty good. We're mostly using cool daylight here. That's pretty good. So white balance for me is to bring your image back to a really good starting point. Now, the other thing to not forget about is the other slider that we have here in white balance, which is the tint. Don't forget about the tint. Sometimes you can think, oh, my edits are looking a little bit too like washed out or too yellow. And that could be because you've got too much green in your image. Sometimes you need to push the magenta up a little bit to take out green. Now, for sure here, we've got a little bit too much green straight out of the camera, and we've got to pull it back up to add a bit more magenta into the skin, right? To pull it back for a good starting point. Now, it's not a lot. A little bit goes a long way here, but it's probably around about there. And so if I turn that off and on, that's the before, that's the after. Small little adjustment there from what it was straight out of the camera to bring that white balance back to being perfect. And you'll immediately see that everything else starts to become more color corrected. The back wall here is meant to be gray or like silver. The dress is meant to be white. These plates are meant to be white. And you can definitely tell we've brought more blue back into those, getting rid of that orangey yellow tone has corrected all of the other different colors in the room. Like you can see the tablecloth here even goes from being quite orange back to being actually purple, which was how it was on the day. And actually being there, I know what was actually meant to be the colors on the day, and that's so important when you're correcting for the white balance. I quickly want to touch on calibration because, as you'll see here in my Lightroom, I've reordered the operations on the right-hand side to the order that I think they should be done in. And after the basic sliders, I think calibration should come next. And calibration is basically used to color correct the RGB channels straight out of your camera. They're not meant to be used as a way to style your image, although they definitely can be. They're supposed to be used to correct the colors coming out of your camera so you can actually color match two separate different cameras, because different cameras are going to have different ways that they interpret different colors. So we can actually change how we're interpreting the red primary, the green primary, and the blue primary coming into each image. Now, I'm pretty happy with this straight out of camera. I'm very happy with the profile that I've got on my camera, but I just wanted to let you know that that's what these are here for. And now, because we've got everything right with the white balance and the calibration, we're back to a really good starting point. That means we can come into our color mixer tab or our HSL tab and just correct a few things. Remove things that we don't want in an image and add things back in that we do. Now, if I turn this back on, you'll notice that it's just a little adjustment that I've done there. I've removed a few of the greens out of the image because there's a bit of green in the back wall and I don't really love the fact that the greens are there. Added back in a little bit more purple into the image, a little bit more orange. You can do that to your own style. This is not where I'm trying to create a different style in the image. I'm just bringing out other things that are already there, a bit of the orange in the background, removing some of those harsher yellow green tones in the saturation there, but also don't want to turn them all the way down. This is not going to be a video on how to use the HSL sliders, but I just wanted to point out that that is something that you can do to help amplify you for when you get to the color grading tab. And I think it's important to remember that everyone's got their own style here of how they're going to grade each one of their different colors and every different hue. We could definitely move them around a lot, but be very careful. A little bit goes a long way here, and you can definitely go too far with it. After that, we've obviously got the tone curve. Now, I've got a tone curve applied here. We're not going to get into the tone curve here today, but I do want to jump into color grading. And this is where things get interesting, right? If you're thinking to yourself, well, I've just really flattened this image out and I've taken out all the different style, all the different color that I like to normally add back into an image. I like to have my images normally quite orange and warm. That is my style as well, and I totally understand. You should definitely be adding that within the color grading section. Now that we've got it to a flat base, we've added a lot more tone, we've got it to a really good starting point that we can add in our own colors and start to create our own style independently in our highlights and in our shadows and in our like midtones as well. We can add different colors to tell a different story, but also to add continuity to our own style. So here we can come in and you'll be able to see straight away, we've got 3 different wheels down here. If I zoom in here, you'll be able to see all those 3 wheels. Okay, so we've got our shadows here, our midtones, and our highlights. But we can open each of these individually, okay? We can just click on them, shadows, midtones, highlights, and you'll be able to get the full wheel. And you'll see here that we've got the full spectrum of colors to add to our image. We don't just have to slide between blue and yellow. And the other big one that we have on the right-hand side here is the global color. Now, if you open that global color, you can add an entire color over the whole image. This would be just what you would do if you thought that you wanted your image to be slightly more orange. You can actually pick which color of orange you would like that to be. Now let me show you what that would look like. If I come in here and I move this across, of course it's adding that orange over the whole image, but I've got option of where I put that color orange. I can slide that the whole way around. I can come up to green and put a green wash on the whole image if I wanted to. Obviously it's not my style, but it could be your style, and that's okay. But I can also come down to a more purpley red and add that across the whole image. Now, I'm not saying I would go quite this far, but I'm just expressing that you could put whatever color you wanted to. And if you stay pretty close into the center here, you can definitely do a lot with that. But I want to come back and show you how to use each of the shadows, midtones, and highlights independently, because I think it's a really good way to be able to show a style in your image. Now, for example here, if I wanted to push a more cooler tone, say in the shadows here, I could come down to the shadows, okay? I've got my wheel here, and I could say, hang on, I want a bit of blue down in the shadows. Now, you'll immediately start to see that it's overlaying a lot of things, right? It's overlaying a lot of blue into the image, but it's only going to be doing it in the darker portions of the image. And we can change where that is depending on our blending down here. We can change how far it blends up into the highlights or just stays down into the really dark areas. Now we can choose, we can drag it away. So if it's not blending as much, it's going to stay down more in the darker areas. If it's blending more, it's going to blend up into the highlights, okay? So we can pull this back down. Now I've decided on adding a bit of blue here, right? Now we can see it starts to go into a little bit of the skin tones, but also the hair as well, okay? We turn that off, the blue comes back on. It adds a bit of coolness down into the darker areas of the image. Now that could be too much, right? Your style is normally meant to be quite warm. So what can we do? We can add in a bit of warmth back into the midtones because our skin tones often lie in the midtones, okay? We can add warmth back into the midtones. And you'll notice that as I do that, as I drag warmth back into the midtones, I can choose what hue I want. I can come around and say, oh, actually, I want it to be more purpley. Or I can come back up and say, I want it to be more yellowy orange. I can really pick where I want that to be. So I don't have to come back up to a green where the back wall starts to look a little bit green and the dress is becoming green. The skin tones are too green there. I'm coming back down to more of a orangey red where I really love where the skin tones are. And I can really be choosy about where I put that. Now I can also choose how much I want it. And because it's not blended as much, it's going to stick to the midtones more and the darker areas are going to stay blue. Okay, if I turn this off and on again, see what's happening before, after, added a lot more warmth back in. Okay, but we're still holding a lot of cool down in the darker areas. We could come back and say, hang on, I want a bit more blue in the dark areas. But the other thing that we have to offset it by is the really bright areas. The dress now might be starting to look too orange, in your opinion. So you could come back up to the highlights and say, hang on, I want to push a nice brighter blue into the dress. Now a little bit goes a long way. Again, you don't want to overdo it. More brighter blue there, more towards a greeny sort of teal blue. We can come up. And you can define how much you want it to be. Like you come in too far and it's probably a bit much, right? It starts to impact on the skin a little bit more. But just a little bit to sort of offset the orange that we pushed into the midtones. Now off again, on again, right? And you can see that we've added more orange back in, but it's been very selective about where it's added it. It's added it in the midtones of the image, so in the background, here in the midtones and the grays, but also in the skin as well, which lie in the midtones. But the highlights have become more blue. You'll see up the top there, it's become more blue as we turn that off and on. We've added more blue in there. Into the dress has become more blue. But the darker areas have become an even darker shade of blue, almost down towards purple, okay? And I could easily say that, hang on, I actually want those really dark areas to be more purple because I like the purple in the tablecloth here. So I want to be able to accentuate that color of purple. So let me drag the hue of this color grading around to purple. Right? And you'll notice as I do it, it starts to look, in my opinion, more pleasing to the eye because we've already got purple in the image. Okay. Now this is the way that I would go about trying to like color grade an image, is trying to amplify what was already there. Of course, you can have your style, and we all have our own style, but we want to be able to actually go into what the space was. So for me here, there's a lot of orange and a lot of purple here already. Right? So I'm going to try to go in with that, creating more of like a triadic harmony. Again, we won't get too much into what that is, but just around a triangle on the wheel here. So I can pull my orange back down a little bit more, correct the skin tones out. It's all about playing with these three to make them work well together. And I can push a bit more blue into the dress, a bit more teal there. We turn that off and on. It's a completely changed image, but it has a lot of nuance in the way that it's applying the different colors in the image. It's not just stale, and it's not just applying one color across the whole image. It's not changing the white balance of the image. It's just coming in and applying different colors over different areas to give us a bit of depth, to give us a bit of story in the image. And if you get to the end of all that and you think, hang on, I want a bit more warmth in this image than there actually is, it started to become too cool all over. You wouldn't come back up and change your white balance because that'll undo everything else for you. It'll change what areas are in the highlights and in the shadows, and it'll just upset the skin tones, okay? That's not the way we should be going about it. Instead, come back down to your color grading, come over to the global color and add a color over the top. And this will add a color over the top of everything. If you want it to be slightly warmer, just come a tiny bit, a little bit warm, okay? Just come over the top. If I turn that off, that's just that global, that's off, right? If I just drag it a little bit, you'll be able to see it's a small change. If I go a long way, of course, it's a heap. I don't want that much, I just want a little bit, but I've got control over where I put it. Again, if I want more greeny orange, I can come this way. But if I want more of like a red tone, I can come down this way. A little bit goes a long way. It'd be the same if I thought it was a bit too orange here, and that wasn't my style. I wanted it to be more cool, okay? I can come down there to a more darker blue, okay? Off there, a lot more blue down there, okay? If that's your style, totally fine. And again, what we're doing here is allowing the skin tones to come through. The skin tones don't stand out as being incorrect here because it's going across the whole image. We're applying this blue across the whole image, and we've graded the image in a nice way that the skin tones blend into what's happening in the rest of the image. They don't look out of place here. And again, you've got a lot more control over what you can do here with the color grading tab. So hopefully that helps you. And I want to jump into another image now to give you a different example. Before we jump into the next edit, I want to let you know that my live photo editing course, Modern Darkroom, is opening next week. It's only open 4 times a year because I go through 8 classes live with my students. Yes, it's live. They're not pre-recorded. We all turn up there at the same time so anyone can ask questions, but the classes are recorded if you can't make it live. We go through classes on things like file organization, color theory, the tone curve, masking, and of course, color grading. If you want to be notified when signups open and get a 20% discount on the course price, jump onto the waitlist, which I'll have linked in the description of this video. Here's another example where you might be thinking this is a little bit too cool straight out of camera. Now this probably is too cool as opposed to the other one, which was probably a bit too warm. But again, we're going to start with our white balance. We're going to warm it back up to a position that looks pretty good. Okay, I've turned my white balance off and we'll get back to a good starting point. Again, it's not a long way here that we're off. We don't have to bring it up to here. Okay, that's starting to impact the grounds becoming too orange. The black in the suit here is becoming too orange. The dress is becoming too orange. Okay, we don't have to go that far. We want to bring it back to a good starting point. So we come up until it's too much and then we just drop it back off a little bit. Okay, now we're on a cloudy day outside here. So it should be pretty warm. About 6,500 looks good, but maybe just a little bit warmer than that. Okay, I'm happy there. So here's the before and the after, okay? Just warmed it up a touch, not too far. Didn't have to go crazy there, just helping to bring out the skin tones back to where they normally should be. If anything, we're probably a little bit warm there. Come touch back, okay? Pretty happy there, all right? Now, again, I've done all the tone adjustments here. We're not gonna worry about that. I might pull a bit of magenta back into this. Again, it's a bit green from the clouds outside. We're gonna pull a bit of magenta back into the skin, okay? Not too much though, okay, cool. It's a good starting position. I don't have to feel like I've got to do too much here. I want this to be a very flat starting position for me. There's not a lot happening, and that's okay. I'm going to add everything back in afterwards when we get down to the color grading. So let me turn, I'm not going to get back into the calibration here. I think that's fine, but you know how to do that now. I'm going to go back into the color mixer. I'm going to turn that on. Okay, I've got it turned off here. All I'm doing there is just removing a little bit of the green and a bit of the yellow tone as well. We removed a bit of yellow, yeah, definitely, and a bit of blue out of the sky, just a little bit, and it just removes it out of the dress. We'll turn that off and on again. So that's before the color mixer, after. Again, just taking out a little bit of green there. It's not primary in this image, and I don't really care for it because I'm going to color grade in the background anyway, and I don't want too much blue coming in. I think a big issue for a lot of people is having too many colors in their image. You don't want to be contrasting and conflicting yourself by having really bright greens, really bright blues, really bright oranges. Everything's happening in just one image. I personally want to remove as many different colors as I can while still keeping the idea of those colors. We have something called color constancy. We remember what things are supposed to look like. Even though I've turned most of the saturation down in that grass there, you still know it's supposed to be green. And once I get to actually color grading it, your brain will just click into thinking that it's green. I don't need to overpower it with really bright greens in order to tell you that it's grass there. So I've just turned those down, and I think that that's going to look really nice when we get to color grading because I'm doing it with that in mind, okay? I've already got my tone curve applied here. So let's jump into color grading. Now, there's heaps of different ways you could go about this, right? As I said in the last one, I wanted to push a little bit of blue into the darker areas, into the shadows, and have a bit of orange in the midtones, and then we went more of a teal in the highlights. Now, you could definitely reverse that. You can do whatever you want. Here, I'm going to go for a more orangey look, but I'm going to push orange into the shadows. I feel like I really want to add more warmth to this image. And I'm going to do that by adding more orange into the shadows. Now, again, heaps of different ways you can go about this, but that's the real beauty of it because not everyone is going to go the same way. And so you can easily create your own style and something you can overlay on a heap of your images really easy as long as you bring them back to a really good starting point. It makes actually color grading your images so much easier across the board when they're all starting from the same starting position. So if I come into the shadows here, what I can do, I want to push a bit of warmth into the shadows. And immediately you'll be able to see the change as I push warmth into the shadows. You'll be able to see the trees go more red, okay? The ground as well. Now, I've gone up pretty high there just to be able to sell the effect, okay? Let's see if I turn that off and on. That's off. It's looking fairly green all around, and that's on. I brought more red, more orange back into the shadows, and I think that looks really nice. But again, I don't want to upset the dress here, and I'm not doing that by adding color grading back in here, because it's just adding it into the shadows and it's not impacting the dress. So I can isolate the really highlights by just changing the color of the highlights here. Now I've gone more of a reddy color in the shadows. So let's go the opposite side of the color wheel and push more of a tealy green into the highlights. Now again, you can see that's adding it into the really bright areas. Now if I turn it up, you'll be able to see it adding into the dress, but also the sky in the background. It's also overlapping a little bit of the skin tone as well. Let's pull that down, come back to about there. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. We turn that off and then on. It's created a style, but I think the skin has become too blue. Okay, we can do a couple of things here. We can take the blending out and just turn it back down. Okay, it's going to pull the different colors out of the skin tones because they're right in the center. So we can do that. But then we can also jump into the midtones. And now where I can really shine is by actually giving the skin tones their own sort of color grade because they lie in those midtones. So I can choose a separate color that it's going to push into the skin tones, okay? Now a little bit goes a long way again, but I can just have control, grab here and just come around and rotate it until I'm happy with it, right? If I'm not happy up here, it looks too green in the skin. I'm gonna come back down this way till it becomes more red in the skin, okay? A little bit more orange. I think skin tone should be more orange than green, and this way a little bit more. Cool. So we turn that off and on, okay? Big dramatic difference. Helps them stand out off the background, but also I've added different colors back into the image that weren't there before, and it's added depth to an image. I couldn't have done this with just using the white balance sliders, okay? There's no way I could have created that style using the white balance sliders. And again, I can apply this over all the images that I've edited from that particular spot. And also I could apply them across other images from throughout this day, but other days as well to create a nice cohesive look throughout my galleries as long as I have a good starting position for all my images. I want a good flat starting position, and that's why using the white balance slider to actually color correct the white balance is so important. Not actually color grade our image, not to create style with our image, but to color correct the white balance using the white balance slider allows us then to use all the other sliders the exact same way across every other image. If you enjoyed this video, consider watching this one up here where I walk you through an entire photo edit from start to finish. We go through everything, a lot more than I went through in this video, everything that I would do in a normal photo edit from start to finish. But also remember to sign up to the waitlist to my photo editing course, which is opening up next week, and you'll get a cheeky 20% off discount when we launch.